Willow Lake, New York. On a bright Saturday morning, March 11th, a thin fog hung over the still waters of Willow Lake. It was the sort of spring day parents remember for years. Children laughing, boats gliding in slow arcs, sunlight shattering on the ripples like shards of glass. Among the families scattered along the pier was Naomi Henderson, age 9, a shy, soft-spoken girl who loved sketching birds in her red notebook. By noon, that same red notebook would become the town's first clue in a mystery that would paralyze this lakeside community for 48 hours. The vanishing Naomi had come to the lake with her mother, Elaine Henderson, and a group of neighbors. She wanted to feed the ducks before lunch, Elaine recalled later, her voice breaking as she pointed toward the reed-lined edge where her daughter had last been seen. The group had set up a picnic a few yards away. 10 minutes, maybe 12, passed before anyone noticed the absence of a small, red-clad figure near the water. At first, it was routine panic. A child wandered off, perhaps following a butterfly trail or a skipping stone. Parents called her name. Other families joined in. The park ranger checked the restrooms, the dock, the parking lot. When the search reached the 30-minute mark, Elaine's trembling hands dialed 911. By the time officers from the Willow Lake Police Department arrived, a soft wind had lifted across the surface, erasing any footprints that might have marked Naomi's path. The red cardigan she'd been wearing, her favorite, embroidered with tiny stars, was missing along with her. A town in motion. Word spread with cruel efficiency. Willow Lake, population 9,000, is the kind of town where news moves faster than official statements. By 2 p.m., volunteers fanned out through the wooded trails that frame the water. Drones buzzed overhead. Deputies combed the shoreline in neat, desperate grids. Chief Daniel Morales addressed reporters at dusk. At this stage, we are treating the case as a missing child. There's no evidence of foul play, but we're not ruling anything out. Behind him, a line of officers continued to tape off the dock area. The yellow tape looked garishly bright against the silver lake, like a wound refusing to close. The red thread, among the few tangible traces left behind, was Naomi's notebook, found half-buried near a bench on the north path. The last page contained a child's drawing, 2 girls holding balloons, both colored red. Beneath it, in a looping hand, she had written, "Kiana and me, same birth." It was a fact that seemed adorable to their parents and trivial to investigators. Until the next afternoon. A reporter's notebook. By Sunday morning, I arrived in Willow Lake to cover what local media were already calling the birthday mystery. The air felt taut with tension. Posters taped to lampposts overnight now fluttered under drizzle, and the scent of wet pine mingled. It was there, investigators later confirmed, that the first fragment of a pattern began to appear, a faint smear of crimson paint on the doorframe, small enough to escape casual notice. A day later, another disappearance. At 3 p.m. Sunday, exactly 27 hours after Naomi vanished, Kiana Lewis went missing from the same lake. The opposite mothers refused to let children out of sight. We're now treating this as a connected abduction case, Chief Morales announced in a press briefing that evening. The words hit like thunder. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team arrived before dawn. For the next 24 hours, every sound in town, a snapping twig, a car door, the whine of a generator, carried the same question. Where are Naomi and Kiana? By Monday morning, Willow Lake no longer looked like a postcard town. The coffee shop that once opened at 6 stayed dark. The elementary school parking lot was empty, except for patrol cars. Everyone had turned into a searcher or a witness. The story that had begun as a simple missing child alert was now a national headline. 2 girls vanish from same lake in 24 hours. Both wore red. The mirror disappearance. The timeline of Kiana Lewis's disappearance was almost surgical in its precision. Security footage from the parking lot clocked her at 3:02 p.m., walking toward the restrooms. At 3:07, a shadow crossed behind her. Indistinct, long, but undeniably human. At 3:10, she was gone. Detectives replayed the footage frame by frame. "It's like watching a ghost," said Special Agent Lori Dunham, who led the FBI task force. "There's movement, but no clear face. Whoever it was, they understood blind spots." The restroom door bore another faint streak. Red pigment again, same shade, almost brushed on deliberately. The forensic team logged it as evidence 12B, unaware it would later form the psychological spine of the entire case. Parallel lives. I spoke that afternoon with Daniel Lewis, Kiana's father. He sat on the steps of their porch, the missing poster photo of his daughter folded into his hands like a prayer card. "She insisted on wearing that red dress," he said it made her look like a superhero. I almost told her. That question hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. Within hours, social media had erupted into speculation. A predator targeting red clothing, a ritual symbol, a serial pattern. Rumors bled faster than the police bulletins. The psychological thread. By nightfall, the investigative team called in Dr. Helen Moreau, a forensic psychologist who specialized in color-based delusions. She met me briefly outside headquarters. "You'd be surprised," she said quietly. "For some individuals, red isn't just a color. It's a trigger. It represents warning, guilt, danger, sometimes personal trauma. If our suspect associates red with something catastrophic, these girls could have become symbols rather than victims in his mind." Her words chilled me more than the evening wind. Symbols, not victims, as if their humanity had been replaced by a hue. Clues on the water. At dawn, divers scoured the northern cove. A deputy flagged down reporters. A small rowboat, half submerged near the R. That question hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. Within hours, social media had erupted into speculation. A predator targeting red clothing. A ritual symbol, a serial pattern. Rumors bled faster than the police bulletins. The psychological thread. By nightfall, the investigative team called in Dr. Helen Moreau, a forensic psychologist who specialized in color-based delusions. She met me briefly outside headquarters. "You'd be surprised," she said quietly. "For some individuals, red isn't just a color. It's a trigger. It represents warning, guilt, danger, sometimes personal trauma. If our suspect associates red with something catastrophic, these girls could have become symbols rather than victims in his mind." Her words chilled me more than the evening wind. Symbols, not victims, as if their humanity had been replaced by a hue. Clues on the water. At dawn, divers scoured the northern cove. A deputy flagged down reporters. A small rowboat, half submerged, near the R. Inside, they found a scrap of red fabric, torn cleanly as if cut with scissors, and a child's silver bracelet, engraved Kiana. The bracelet was new, a birthday gift. The precision of its placement felt almost theatrical, as though someone wanted it found. Forensic teams confirmed the fibers from both scenes matched industrial paint residue used on older warehouse floors. That clue pointed detectives toward the abandoned granite mill complex, 2 miles from town. A relic of the textile boom, shuttered for decades. The warehouse I arrived at the cordon just after noon. The building's windows were boarded, its walls layered in graffiti and ivy. The smell of rust and damp concrete hung thick. Inside, the search unit found evidence that made seasoned officers step back. A single child's shoe, a half-eaten chocolate bar, and a streak of red paint looping across the wall like a signature. Beneath it, etched into the dust, a phrase: "Red keeps the danger away." To the officers, it was nonsense. To Dr. Moreau, it was revelation. "This is a compulsive pattern," she explained. "He's painting safety where he perceives threat. The girls in red may have represented the danger itself. He's trying to erase that threat by controlling it." The race against time. With each hour, the odds of finding Naomi and Kiana alive dropped. Helicopters swept the nearby forests, while canine units traced the scent from the warehouse toward an old service road leading deeper into the marshland. At 7:43 p.m., a deputy found tire tracks pressed into the mud, fresh and leading north. Matching impressions were spotted near the lakeshore where Naomi disappeared. The pattern of the treads, a distinctive crosshatch, belonged to a 1980s Ford van, faded red under grime. The police now had a vehicle. What they didn't have was time. A town holds its breath. That night, Willow Lake gathered for a candlelight vigil. Hundreds lined the pier, their faces dimly lit by flickering flames. The air was still, as if the lake itself refused to move. When Elaine Henderson stepped forward to speak, her voice cracked. "Naomi loved this place. Please, whoever has them, bring our girls home." Her plea played on every national channel. What no one knew then was that less than 15 miles away, in a forgotten farmhouse at the edge of the marsh, two frightened children were listening to the same broadcast through a cracked radio speaker, and their captor was painting a new streak of red on the wall behind them. By Tuesday morning, 48 hours after Naomi's first cry vanished across Willow Lake, the search had turned into a siege of patience and dread. Detectives were no longer chasing sightings. They were chasing patterns. Small repetitions that hinted at a single deliberate mind moving through the woods. 0. At 6 a.m., a state trooper spotted a flash of dull crimson between the trees off County Road 12. What at first looked like a derelict delivery van turned out to be the 1984 Ford Econoline police had been hunting. Its rear windows were painted over from the inside, and along the driver's door, someone had smeared a wide band of red paint, fresh and tacky to the touch. Inside the van lay a folded map of Willow Lake State Park, marked with thin red X's around the shoreline, and, tucked into the glove compartment, 2 birthday cards dated March 11th. Both were unsigned. It was the first real break, Chief Morales told me. But the precision of those markings, that's what made us realize we weren't dealing with impulse. This was ritual. A portrait emerges. Fingerprint analysis led investigators to Elias Granger, 42, a former maintenance worker at the Granite Mill complex. His employment records noted a termination for repeated vandalism incidents involving red paint. Granger had no violent record, only a string of petty trespassing charges, yet neighbors described him as the man who talked to colors. When I visited the narrow duplex he had once rented on 5th Street, the landlord showed me inside a room, still stained with looping red circles along the walls. "He said red kept the storms away," she whispered. "He'd paint it every time thunder rolled." The delusion behind the color. Dr. Moreau joined the task force armed with a warrant. Officers expanded the search radius from the van's location. Dogs caught a faint scent trail leading toward the marshland ridge. Every 20 minutes, the radio crackled with coordinates and half-formed hopes. The air smelled of wet iron, that metallic scent that always seems to precede bad news. At 4:32 p.m., a deputy reported hearing a muffled sound from a derelict farmhouse on Old Merritt Road. The property belonged to the estate of a deceased relative of Granger's. It was 10 miles from town, invisible behind overgrown pines. Inside the farmhouse, when the tactical unit arrived, the setting sun threw long beams through the broken windows, painting the dust crimson. On the porch hung a child's balloon, red, half deflated. They breached the door at 5:01 p.m. What they found inside would later be described in court transcripts as an improvised sanctuary. Red lines streaked every wall. The kitchen table was covered with old paint cans, birthday candles, and children's drawings cut from magazines. In one corner stood a makeshift cage of wooden lattice, large enough for 2 small figures. And within it, huddled together beneath a thin blanket, were Naomi Henderson and Kiana Lewis, alive, trembling, their faces ghost-pale but uninjured. The first officer on scene, Sergeant Marla Diaz, lifted them out one by one. When I told them they were safe, she recalled later, Naomi just whispered, "He said red makes the bad things stop." The arrest Granger was found in the adjacent room, kneeling before a wall he'd been repainting, hands dripping scarlet. He offered no resistance. "You shouldn't wear the warning color," he murmured as officers cuffed him. "It calls the danger. I had to keep them safe from it." His words, recorded on the body cam footage, would become the line every network replayed that night. Relief and reverberations. When news of the rescue reached Willow Lake at dusk, the church bells rang spontaneously. Crowds gathered outside the police station, some weeping, others silent. Elaine Henderson collapsed into her husband's arms when told Naomi was alive. "It's like she was gone for years," she told me through tears. "Now I can breathe again." The town, however, did not breathe easily. For every cheer, there lingered a shiver. The uneasy knowledge that salvation had arrived a single hour before tragedy could have hardened. Investigators confirmed that Granger had mixed a new batch of paint in the farmhouse sink. For what purpose, they still won't say. The analyst's verdict. In an interview after the arrest, Dr. Moreau summarized the case with clinical restraint. "He wasn't hunting children," she said. "He was hunting color. The tragedy is that innocence happened to wear his obsession." The statement, printed across national headlines the next morning, distilled the horror into one haunting truth. What terrified a town was not simply a man's madness, but its randomness, the fragility of reason, undone by something as ordinary as a shade of red. The morning after, Wednesday dawned with a different kind of silence over Willow Lake. For 2 days, the town had echoed with helicopter blades and the sharp orders of search crews. Now, only church bells and the faint hum of news vans broke the calm. From every porch hung the same small symbol, a red ribbon, not for danger, but for deliverance. At the Henderson home, balloons filled the living room, but no one smiled easily. Naomi sat between her parents, clutching the same red cardigan she'd worn on the day she vanished. "She keeps asking if she can paint it another color," Elaine said softly. "She thinks red brings bad luck now." Across town, the Lewis family faced the same uneasy joy. Kiana's laughter returned in brief bursts, then vanished under silence. "She flinches when she sees a red car," her father admitted. "We tell her it's just a color, but to her, it's a sound, like footsteps coming closer." The media storm. By midday, Willow Lake was surrounded by satellite trucks. National anchors broadcast from the pier where the first police tape had fluttered. Every network replayed the footage of Granger's arrest. The man's paint-streaked hands and his unsettling whisper, "You shouldn't wear the warning color." Some commentators called it a miracle. Others called it luck. But to the people of Willow Lake, it was neither. It was exhaustion, a trauma that refused to fade once the cameras moved on. Chief Morales. The arraignment of Elias Granger took place under heavy security at the county courthouse. I sat 3 rows behind the victims' families as the accused entered, a gaunt figure in a gray jumpsuit, wrists chained, head bowed. He did not look at the crowd. When asked for his plea, his voice was barely audible. Not guilty by reason of mental disease. A murmur rippled through the room. The prosecutor, District Attorney Monroe, outlined the evidence: fingerprints, the van, the pate samples, the statements from the rescued girls. Dr. Moreau, now officially the court's psychiatric consultant, testified that Granger suffered from chromatic paranoia, a delusional disorder in which colors are perceived as omens of harm. His fixation on red began after a factory fire 15 years ago, she told the court. He painted his surroundings to neutralize fear. In his mind, abducting the girls was an act of containment, not cruelty. Her words did little to soften the room. Elaine Henderson rose briefly, voice shaking. Whatever he thought, he stole their peace. A community on trial. Beyond the courthouse steps, opinion divided. Some residents demanded harsh punishment. Others argued for psychiatric treatment. The local paper ran an editorial titled, "Madness and Morality. Can Evil Be Sick?" In cafes, people debated whether the warning signs had been missed. When the judge pronounced sentence, Naomi's mother wept in relief. Not joy, exactly, but closure. Outside, the sky had turned the faint pink of evening, the color hovering uneasily between calm and danger. Healing in shades, in the months that followed, Willow Lake slowly reclaimed its rhythm. The pier reopened. Children returned to the water, though most wore blue or yellow now. An artist from the next county painted a mural on the boathouse wall, a sunrise in soft pastels. Deliberately avoiding red, Naomi began therapy through art sessions, painting birds again, this time in greens and violets. Kiana joined her once a week. Their drawings hung side by side in the community center. 2 girls holding balloons, the colors deliberately pale. Dr. Moreau visited occasionally to study the town's recovery. Trauma, she told me, leaves a tint on everything. The goal isn't to erase it, it's to learn how to see through it. On my last evening in Willow Lake, I walked the shoreline where the story began. The water was still, reflecting the fading light like glass. The red ribbons tied along the railings fluttered softly in the wind, no longer symbols of fear, but reminders of fragility, of how easily the ordinary can tip into nightmare. As the sun sank, the lake caught one final glint of crimson on the horizon. For a moment, I understood what haunted Elias Granger, how beauty and terror can share the same color. Then the light shifted. The families stand side by side, Hendersons and Lewises, holding white lilies. Naomi, now 10, rests her head against her mother's shoulder. Kiana, 8, tugs nervously at the sleeve of her pastel yellow jacket. Their birthdays are today. The lake that once swallowed their laughter has become a place of quiet reckoning. The town that changed its colors, Willow Lake, no longer paints its fences red. The local council even replaced stop signs that had faded too bright. A strange but symbolic gesture. We decided to repaint everything in calm shades, Mayor Roberts says. Not to erase what happened, but to remind ourselves we're choosing peace. Every spring since the rescue, the town hosts the Festival of Light, an event that replaces the usual parade of balloons and fireworks with lanterns. Children float them across the lake at dusk, watching tiny orbs drift into the dark. This year, 2 lanterns glowed brighter than the rest. They bore the girls' names, written in silver ink, and the words, "Safe Now." The lives beyond the headlines. Both Naomi and Kiana attend therapy together twice a week. We call it the Brave Hour, says their counselor, Mrs. Kessler. They don't talk much about that day, but they draw. Naomi still sketches birds. Kiana likes painting skies. Their friendship has deepened into something unspoken, two souls connected by fear and survival. They don't remember every detail, Naomi's father says quietly. Maybe that's a mercy. At school, they sit at the same desk. When asked about their favorite color, both answered yellow. The teacher didn't press further. The town's collective memory. For most towns, tragedies fade into footnotes. But Willow Lake learned to live with its story rather than bury it. A new mural now covers the boathouse wall, painted by local students under the guidance of a visiting artist. It shows two girls walking hand in hand, one carrying a lantern, the other pointing toward a sunrise. Behind them, faint but deliberate, is a stripe of muted red. Not bright, not violent, just a quiet reminder that healing never erases the past. It simply softens its edges. At the dedication ceremony, Chief Morales spoke briefly. "We've spent a year trying to understand why," he said. "But sometimes, the question isn't why things happen, it's how we come back from them." The fate of Elias Granger. At St. Clair Psychiatric Facility, Elias Granger lives under constant supervision. Doctors describe him as lucid but detached. He spends most of his time painting, always in monochrome. His cell walls are pale gray, and his brushes are stripped of color. He no longer asks for red, a nurse told me when I called last month. He says it's too loud now. His case has become a point of study in criminal psychology courses, the Willow Lake delusion. Experts debate whether he can ever comprehend the fear he caused. The courts will decide in coming years if he remains indefinitely institutionalized. For Willow Lake, that verdict no longer matters. The danger is contained. A reporter returns. When I returned to the lake this year to cover the anniversary, I expected a sense of closure. Instead, what I found was gentleness, the kind that comes only after surviving something unspeakable. Children rode bikes down the boardwalk. The sound of laughter echoed across the pier again. For a moment, it was just another spring day. Elaine Henderson spotted me near the water and waved. "You were here the first night," she said. "I still remember your notebook." I asked her what she wanted people to remember now. She smiled faintly. "That darkness doesn't win," she said. "It just teaches you how to find light faster next time." As the sun began to set, hundreds of paper lanterns drifted across Willow Lake. Their reflections shimmered like stars scattered in water, and in that mirrored sky, I saw the town's heartbeat again, slower, steadier, still tinged with red, but glowing toward gold. When the final lantern dimmed beyond the reeds, the lake returned to silence. But not emptiness. It was the silence of peace hard-earned, of breath finally steady. And as I closed my notebook, I wrote one last line for the record. Willow Lake will always remember the day fear wore red, and how love turned it into light.